In this standard, we are going to understand square and cube roots. The standard is EE2. Use square root and cube root symbols to represent solutions to equations. A square root symbol is a type of radical symbol. This is called the radicand. It means calculate the square root of my radicand when you're taking the square root symbol. A radicand is the symbol when you're taking the square root of something, or a cube root. A cube root symbol, it means calculate the cube root of my radicand. Now, a cube root is the number that when cubed produces that number. For example, 2 to the third power is 2 times 2 times 2. So the cube root of 8, you're trying to look for the number multiplied by itself 3 times, that'll give you 8. In this case, it's 2. Square root. A number's square root is the number that when squared produces that number. For example, 3 squared equals 9. So the square root of 9, you're looking for what number times itself gives you 9. The square root of 9 is 3. What I would highly recommend is memorize this chart. You need to memorize perfect squares. A perfect square is a number with integers as its square root. A perfect square can only be found using whole numbers as the exponent. For example, 1 to the second power is 1, 2 to the second power is 4, and so on and so forth. If you can memorize this chart, taking the square root of something is going to be extremely easy. For example, the square root of 100. You're looking for what number times itself 2 times is 100. The answer is 10. Square root. A square root is a number that when multiplied by itself equals the given number. To find a square root, you take a square and you multiply 2 of the side lengths to get the square root. Now, if I had 36 and I want to take the square root of it, the easiest way to do this is think of a number multiplied by itself that will give you 36. The square root of 36 is 6. Now, let's solve these. X squared equals 64. To solve for x, we have to do the opposite of squaring. The opposite of squaring is taking the square root. Whatever you do to one side, you do the other. X equals 8. X squared equals 100. You take the square root of both sides. The square root of 100 is 10. 10 is another example of a perfect square. Now, let's say I had a square, and the area of that square was 144. Now, since it is a square, I know it is a perfect square, meaning both sides are equivalent to one another. So if I wanted to find x, all I would have to do is take the square root of 144, and I think to myself, what number times itself gives 144? The answer is 12. So the square root of 144 is 12. Cube root. A cube root is a number times itself 3 times to give the given number. To find a cube root, you multiply 3 of the side lengths to get the cube root. For example, the cube root of 8. Okay, I take the cube root of both sides. And then I think to myself, what number times itself 3 times is 8? 2 times 2 times 2 is equivalent to 8. So in this problem, x equals 2. Cube root of 64. Now, cube roots are harder because you are multiplying a number 3 times. In this example, I would try some until I got used to it. So I know 2 to the third power is 8. So it's not that. So let's try 4. (64). So the cube root of 64 is 4. Square root of 169. As you can tell, there's a 2 there. That doesn't always happen. Normally it's just written like this. Square root of 169. A number multiplied by itself is 13. The square root of 81 is 9. The cube root of 27 We just did that one. It's 3. And the cube root of 125 is 5. Another suggestion I have for you is memorize some of those cube roots. If you memorize perfect squares and you memorize the cube roots, square roots are going to be extremely easy. And I would highly recommend that because when we get into simplifying radicals in Algebra 1, it all comes back to this.